The mahogany table in the lawyer's office is exactly 6 feet long, and for the first 20 minutes of the reading, it feels like a demilitarized zone. Clara sits at the far end. She is wearing a jacket she bought at a thrift store 3 years ago, and she is actively trying to make herself smaller. Across from her, Julian is checking his watch. Sloane is arranging her gold pens in a perfect, parallel row. They are vibrating with the specific, exhausting energy of people who have spent 2 decades running a marathon they were guaranteed to win. They know they are going to get the Mendocino house. It isn't just a house. It is the coastal estate their parents bought when Clara was 7. It is the backdrop for every curated family photograph, every holiday card, every subtle reminder of what the family actually looks like when they are whole. The wraparound porch where their mother hosted her famous summer galas, the kitchen with the copper pots that Julian and Sloane were explicitly promised in their mother's verbal will, a phrase she used often, right up until the day she couldn't speak anymore. Julian and Sloane have spent their entire adult lives polishing the brass on that door, waiting for the day it legally becomes theirs. And Clara? Clara is just here because the lawyer, a tired man named David who looks like he hasn't slept since 2018, told her attendance was mandatory. She didn't want the house. She hasn't been inside it in 6 years. But to understand why Clara is sitting at the end of this table, watching her siblings practically vibrate out of their designer shoes, you have to understand the architecture of the family she left behind. In Clara's family, love was not a given. It was a currency. And the exchange rate was set entirely by her mother, Evelyn. Evelyn was a woman who believed that affection should be earned through flawless execution. If you got an A, you were loved. If you married well, you were loved. If you hosted Thanksgiving without burning the gravy, you were loved. Julian and Sloane understood the assignment. They became the golden children, the extensions of Evelyn's ego. They married people with the right last names. They bought houses in the right zip codes. They never, ever raised their voices. Clara tried, at first. She really did. But Clara had a fatal flaw, at least in Evelyn's eyes. She had a spine. When Clara was 19, she pointed out that her father, Richard, was drinking too much. She was labeled disruptive. When she was 22, she refused to let Sloane use her college fund for a business venture that was actually just a timeshare. She was labeled selfish. By 25, when she finally stopped apologizing for existing, she was labeled the black sheep. The exile wasn't sudden. It was a slow, quiet freezing out. Evelyn didn't just exclude Clara. She actively rewrote the narrative. To the extended family, Clara was the one who couldn't handle the pressure of their high-achieving household. She was the fragile one, the one who chose to isolate herself. It was a masterclass in making the victim look like the aggressor. They stopped inviting her to holidays. Then they stopped calling. Then, they simply began speaking about her in the past tense, as if she had died, which, in their minds, was probably more convenient. So Clara left. She moved 3 states away. She built a life that was quiet, uncurated, and entirely her own. She became a landscape architect, spending her days designing gardens that were allowed to grow wild, allowed to be imperfect. She stopped waiting for the phone to ring. She stopped checking the family group chat. She stopped caring. Or at least, she thought she had. Because here's the thing about being the family scapegoat. You spend so much time trying to survive the cold that you forget what it feels like to stand in the sun. You build a fortress. You tell yourself you don't need them. And for a long time, you actually believe it. But then your father dies. And 6 months later, your mother follows. And suddenly, you are sitting in a mahogany-paneled room, and the people who spent 20 years making you feel like a mistake are looking at you with a smile that doesn't reach their eyes. It is a very specific kind of grief, realizing that even in death, they still want to make you feel small. Julian clears his throat. He taps his gold pen against the table. "David," he says, using the lawyer's first name with a familiarity that makes Clara's jaw tighten. "Can we just get this over with? We have a contractor coming to the house at 3. David looks up from his file. He takes off his glasses. He rubs the bridge of his nose. "There is no contractor, Julian," David says. His voice is flat, devoid of the polite warmth he used when they first walked in. "Because you aren't getting the house." Sloane stops arranging her pens. Julian's pen hovers in the air. "Excuse me?" Julian says. David opens the folder. He slides a single piece of paper across the 6-foot mahogany table. It stops exactly in front of Clara. "Your mother," David says, looking directly at Clara, "left the Mendocino property to you, outright, free and clear." The silence in the room is so absolute it rings in Clara's ears. And that detail, the way Julian's face drains of color, the way Sloane's perfectly manicured hand suddenly looks very, very heavy, is the one that makes everything else make sense. The silence in the room doesn't just hang, it shatters. Julian is the first to recover, mostly because his entire identity is built on the assumption that he is owed things. He leans forward, planting both hands flat on the mahogany. "David, there has been a mistake. My mother explicitly told us the house was ours. We've been maintaining it. We've been paying the property taxes out of our own pockets." "You've been paying the property taxes," David corrects, his voice entirely devoid of the polite warmth he used when they first walked in. "Because the estate's operating account was overdrawn. Your mother didn't leave you the house, Julian. She left you the rest of the estate." Sloane stops arranging her pens. Her hand hovers over a gold barrel. "The rest of the estate," she repeats, the words tasting like ash. "Which includes the primary residence in Pacific Palisades, the investment portfolio, and the commercial loans," David finishes. And there it is, the architecture of Evelyn's final, perfect control. To understand why this isn't just a legal surprise, but a psychological masterpiece, you have to understand how Evelyn viewed her assets. She didn't view them as gifts to be given. She viewed them as leashes to be pulled. For 20 years, she dangled the Mendocino house in front of Julian and Sloane. It was the ultimate carrot. Work harder, marry better, host the perfect holiday without complaining. The house was the reward for perfect, unyielding compliance. But Evelyn also knew something her golden children didn't. The Pacific Palisades house was drowning in a second mortgage. The investment portfolio was heavily leveraged against a failing LLC. The empire she had built was actually a house of cards, held together by credit and the sheer, exhausting momentum of keeping up appearances. She couldn't take the debt with her, but she could decide who inherited it. She gave the golden children the crown, and she gave the black sheep the kingdom. If you've ever sat in a room where the people who were supposed to love you treated your existence as a negotiation, you know exactly what it feels like to watch the scales finally balance. It doesn't feel like triumph. It feels like gravity. It feels like the sudden, dizzying realization that you don't have to carry the weight anymore. If that resonance is hitting home for you today, take a second to subscribe. We do this every week, slowing down the moments where the truth finally catches up to the people who tried to outrun it. Back in the office, Julian's face is cycling through shades of red. "This is ridiculous," he snaps. "She was confused at the end. The medication—" "Your mother was evaluated by 2 independent physicians," David interrupts. "She was of sound mind. She specifically amended her will 3 weeks before she passed. She was very clear." Sloane finally speaks. Her voice is terrifyingly calm. "Why her?" It's the question that has been sitting in the center of the table since Clara walked in. Why the daughter who left? Why the daughter who refused to play the game? David looks at Clara. He doesn't look pitying. He looks respectful. Because, David says, she asked me to read you the addendum she attached to the deed. He slides a second piece of paper across the table. This one isn't for Clara. It's for Julian and Sloane. It says, David reads, his eyes tracking the neat, familiar handwriting. Julian and Sloane have spent their lives building the life I wanted for them. They have the Palisades house and they have the portfolio. They have the stage. Clara is the only one who ever built a life she actually wanted. The Mendocino house is the only place she ever felt safe. It is hers. Do not contact her about the debts. The estate covers them. It wasn't just an inheritance. It was an eviction notice from their mother's narrative. For 2 decades, Evelyn had convinced Julian and Sloane that they were the center of the universe and that Clara was a cautionary tale. In 3 sentences, she reclassified them both. They weren't the heirs. They were the staff. They were the ones left holding the bag, tasked with maintaining the illusion of the family's wealth, while the failure got to walk away with the only thing that actually had value. Julian stares at the paper. His mouth opens, but no sound comes out. Sloane's perfectly manicured hand finally drops from the pen, landing with a dull thud against the wood. But the addendum wasn't the final word, because Evelyn wasn't done making them pay, and the real trap wasn't the debt they just inherited. Julian doesn't yell. That's the thing about the Golden children. When they are truly cornered, they don't throw a tantrum. They throw a guilt trip. He stands up, smoothing the front of his tailored trousers. He looks at David, then he looks at Clara. His expression shifts from shock to a practiced, patronizing concern. It's the exact same look he gave her when she dropped out of her pre-law track to study landscape architecture. Clara, he says, his voice dripping with faux sympathy. You don't even live in this state. You can't maintain that property. The upkeep alone is $40,000 a year. It's a waste. Did you hear that? It's a waste. He didn't say we need it. He said it's a waste for her to have it. He still genuinely believes that her holding the deed is a misallocation of family resources. He isn't asking for the house. He's asking her to correct a clerical error in his favor. Clara just looks at him. For 20 years, that look would have made her shrink. It would have made her apologize for taking up space. But today, sitting in the quiet hum of the lawyer's office, she just watches him work. She sees the panic vibrating beneath his collar. She sees the exact moment he realizes that the safety net he's been walking on his entire life just dissolved. Have you ever been in a room where someone was actively trying to manage your reality and you just had to sit there and watch them do it? Tell me about the moment you finally stopped arguing and just started observing. I read every single one. Clara doesn't take the bait. She doesn't defend her ability to maintain the house. She doesn't remind him that she spends her days managing complex, multi-acre ecological restorations for a living. She just folds her hands in her lap. I'll think about it, Julian, she says. It is the most devastating thing she could possibly say, because it's the truth. She actually will think about it, and the answer will be no. But Julian isn't done. He leans over the table, planting his hands on the mahogany again. Mom wouldn't have wanted this, he hisses. She wanted the family to stay together. She wanted us to share the legacy. You're taking the one thing that keeps us connected. It's a brilliant piece of theater. If you didn't know the history, you'd think he was the aggrieved party. You'd think Clara was the greedy one, hoarding the family treasure while her siblings got left out in the cold. But David, the lawyer, finally closes the file. The sound of the cardboard cover snapping shut echoes like a gunshot in the small room. Julian, David says. His voice is entirely stripped of patience. Your mother didn't leave you the Palisades house to keep the family connected. She left it to you because it is the only asset she had that she couldn't legally shield from creditors. The air leaves the room. Sloane's gold pen slips from her fingers and clatters onto the table. Creditors? She whispers. David looks at Sloane, then back to Julian. The Pacific Palisades property has a negative equity of roughly $2.4 million. Your mother took out a second and then a third mortgage against it over the last 5 years. The funds were used to cover the operating deficits of your LLC, Julian, and to service the debt on Sloane's commercial real estate purchases. He didn't just inherit the stage. He inherited the trap door. Evelyn hadn't just been dangling the Mendocino house as a carrot. She had been using the Palisades house as an ATM. And she had been funding her golden children's lavish, curated lifestyles with money they didn't have, leveraging the one asset they thought was their birthright. Clara sits perfectly still. She looks at her brother, whose face has now gone from red to a sickly, translucent gray. She looks at her sister, whose perfect posture has collapsed inward, as if her spine has suddenly turned to water. They aren't the heirs. They are the liabilities. And the most beautiful, terrifying part of it all? Evelyn knew. She knew exactly what she was doing when she signed those papers. She knew the house was underwater. She knew the LLC was bleeding cash. And in her final act of control, she decided that the children who played the game perfectly would get to keep the illusion, while the child who walked away would get the actual dirt beneath her feet. But Evelyn's final maneuver wasn't just about the money, because buried in that same file, right beneath the mortgage disclosures, was a document that would change everything Clara thought she knew about why she was exiled in the first place. David reaches into the very bottom of the manila folder. He pulls out a single, heavy cream-colored envelope. It is sealed with wax. Clara's name is written across the front in her mother's unmistakable, looping cursive. Your mother instructed me to give you this only after the financial disclosures were read, David says. Clara takes the envelope. Her hands are perfectly steady, which surprises her. She slides her thumb under the flap and tears it open. Inside is a single sheet of paper. She doesn't read it out loud. She just reads it to herself. But in the dead silence of the office, the scratching of her eyes moving across the page feels deafening. The letter is short. Clara, if you are reading this, the Palisades house has finally swallowed them whole, and you are sitting in Mendocino. Your father's investments didn't just fail, they collapsed. The LLC was a shell. The debt was insurmountable. I needed to protect at least one of you from the bankruptcy that was inevitably coming, but I couldn't protect you if you stayed. If you were in the fold, I would have leveraged your good credit. I would have put your name on the refinancing. You are too responsible, Clara. You would have said yes to help the family. So I had to make you leave. I had to make you the black sheep. I had to make you build a life so entirely your own that my creditors couldn't touch it. Clara lowers the paper. The air in the room feels very thin. Think about that for a second. The woman who made you feel like you weren't enough to be in the room was actually the only one trying to keep you out of the blast radius. It doesn't make it okay. It doesn't erase the years of silence, but it changes the shape of the thing entirely. Have you ever looked back at a painful family fracture and realized, years later, that the other person was actually trying to protect you, even if they did it terribly? Tell me about the moment the narrative flipped for you in the comments. Clara looks up from the letter. She doesn't look triumphant. She just looks incredibly tired. The anger she has carried in her chest for 20 years, the hot, bright indignation of being the family outcast, doesn't vanish, but it suddenly loses its oxygen. It was never about her being flawed. It was about her being useful as a casualty. David clears his throat. He looks at Julian and Sloane. His expression softens, just a fraction, into something that almost looks like pity. There is an addendum to the letter for you both, David says. Julian flinches. I don't need to hear it. You do, David says, because it explains why the estate is legally barred from bailing you out. David picks up a second piece of paper. Evelyn writes, Julian, Sloane, you were my golden children because I needed you to be. I needed you close. I needed your signatures on the second mortgage. I needed your pride to blind you to the paper you were signing. You wanted the lifestyle, so I gave it to you. But the bill has come due, and I have nothing left to give you. The Mendocino house is Clara's. The Palisades house is the bank's. Do not ask your sister for help. She spent 20 years paying for your inheritance with her isolation. Her debt to this family is paid. The Golden children weren't the favorites. They were the Shields.
Evelyn had used their ambition against them. They wanted the stage, the applause, the beautiful house in Pacific Palisades. So she gave it to them entirely on credit, using their own signatures to bind them to the sinking ship. She kept them close so she could use them, and she pushed Clara away so Clara could survive. Julian stares at the wall. The color has completely drained from his face, leaving him looking like a wax figure of himself. The tailored suit suddenly looks like a costume. Sloane is staring at her hands, her perfectly manicured nails digging into her palms. The realization is landing on them both at the exact same time. Their entire identity, their entire sense of superiority, was just an elaborate financial instrument. They weren't loved more. They were just leveraged higher. Clara folds the letter. She slides it back into the envelope. She stands up. She doesn't gloat. She doesn't say, "I told you so." She just looks at her siblings, really looks at them, and sees them for the first time not as the monsters who exiled her, but as the trapped animals they always were. But Evelyn's letter didn't just rewrite the past. It gave Clara a choice about the future that neither of her siblings saw coming. Julian doesn't accept it. That's the thing about people who have spent their entire lives being told they are the center of the universe. When the gravity suddenly shifts, they don't just stumble. They thrash. He lunges forward, both hands slamming flat against the mahogany. The polished, tailored veneer is gone. His tie is slightly crooked. His face is blotchy. "She was sick, David," he snarls, his voice cracking. "She was on morphine. She was barely conscious. This is undue influence. We will contest this. We will tie this up in probate for a decade." David doesn't flinch. He just taps a manila folder. "Your mother recorded the signing, Julian. 2 independent witnesses, a notarized video of her explaining the addendum line by line. You can contest it, but you will lose, and you will drain whatever liquidity you have left in legal fees." Julian stares at the folder. The fight drains out of him, replaced instantly by a desperate, ugly panic. He turns to Clara. The brother who used to patronizingly pat her head at Thanksgiving is gone. In his place is a stranger drowning in debt. "You selfish idiot," he hisses. "You have no idea what you're doing. We will be ruined. The bank will take the Palisades house. We'll have nothing." Sloane joins in. The tears start. They are real tears, but they are weaponized. "Clara, please," she sobs, reaching across the table to try and touch Clara's arm. Clara pulls back, just an inch, but it's enough. "We have mortgages. We have children's college funds. You don't even live in this state. Just sign it over to the estate. We can refinance. We can fix this, please. Listen to the shift. 10 minutes ago, you were the fragile black sheep who couldn't handle the pressure of the family. Now that they need you, you are the only one strong enough to save them. They didn't exile you because you were weak. They exiled you because you were the only one they couldn't control, and now they are praying your independence can be their bailout." Clara looks at her sister's tears. She looks at her brother's red, desperate face. For 20 years, she would have caved. She would have signed the paper just to stop the noise, just to buy 5 minutes of peace, just to prove she was a team player. But the fog is gone. She sees the architecture of the trap. If she signs it over to the estate, the bank takes it anyway to cover the Palisades debt. They are trying to use her as a shield just like their mother used them. Softly. "No," Clara says. Julian slams his hand on the table again. "It's not a request, Clara. It's the only way we don't lose everything." Clara stands up. She buttons her thrift store jacket. She doesn't look angry. She just looks incredibly clear. She looks at David. "David, What is the current market valuation on the Mendocino property? David checks his notes. Roughly 3.2 million. Unencumbered. Clara nods. List it. Today. I want a cash offer. Close of escrow in 30 days. And David? Intense. Make sure the commission structure is entirely separate from the estate's primary broker. I don't want Julian or Sloan getting a cut of the sale as estate executors. Julian's mouth falls open. You can't do that. We are the executors. You are the beneficiaries of the Palisades debt, Clara says. Her voice is perfectly level. I am the sole owner of the Mendocino property. I don't need an executor to sell my own house. Sloan stops crying. The tears vanish instantly, replaced by a cold, hard stare. The mask is completely off now. You're going to let us go bankrupt over a house you don't even care about. I'm not letting you go bankrupt, Sloan, Clara says, picking up her bag. I'm just no longer paying for your lifestyle with my life. She turns and walks toward the heavy oak door of the office. She has done it. She has finally drawn the line in the sand, not with anger, but with absolute, unshakable boundaries. She is walking away with the one thing they actually wanted, and she is leaving them with the reality they earned. But she doesn't walk out that door, because Julian pulls out his phone, and the thing he reads from the screen changes the entire shape of the room. Julian's phone buzzes against the mahogany table. It's a sharp, violent sound in the quiet room. He glances down, and the color that had just started to return to his face completely vanishes. He doesn't hand the phone to David. He doesn't show it to Sloan. He just stares at the screen, his thumb hovering over the glass, as if looking away will unsend the message. Softly. What is it? Sloan whispers. Julian swallows hard. His voice is barely audible. It's the bank. The Palisades house. They're calling the balloon payment on the third mortgage. He looks up, his eyes wide and unseeing. It's due in 30 days. 30 days. That's all it takes for a 20-year illusion to evaporate. The Golden children didn't just lose the inheritance they thought they were owed, they lost the stage they had been performing on their entire lives. The curtain is coming down, and they are still standing in the spotlight, waiting for a cue that is never going to come. Clara watches him. She doesn't feel a surge of triumph. She doesn't feel the bitter satisfaction of seeing them finally understand what it feels like to be powerless. She just feels a profound, exhausting clarity. She picks up her bag. She slings it over her shoulder. I hope you figure it out, Julian, she says. Her voice is completely level. There is no anger in it. No pity. Just the quiet, absolute finality of a door closing. She walks to the heavy oak door, turns the brass handle, and steps out into the hallway. She doesn't look back. She doesn't need to. She already knows what she will see if she does. Her siblings sitting at the end of a 6-foot table, realizing for the first time that they are entirely, completely alone. 3 weeks later, Clara drives up the coastal highway to Mendocino. She doesn't go to list the house. She doesn't go to pack it up. She goes because, for the first time in her life, she has the keys. The house is exactly as it was in the photographs. The wraparound porch, the copper pots in the kitchen, the perfectly manicured lawn that her mother used to demand be edged every Sunday. But without Evelyn there to curate the atmosphere, the house just feels like wood and glass and ocean air. It feels like a place where a family used to pretend to be happy. Clara walks out to the back deck. She sits down on the top step, looking out at the Pacific. The wind is coming off the water, cold and sharp and entirely indifferent to who owns the deed. She takes a deep breath. And for the first time in 20 years, her lungs expand all the way to the bottom. We spend so much of our lives trying to earn a seat at a table where we are only valued for what we can provide. We twist ourselves into knots, we shrink ourselves down, we accept the cold shoulder and the quiet exile, all because we believe that if we just play the game perfectly, they will finally see us. They will finally love us. But sometimes the greatest gift you can be given is being pushed out of the room, because when you are outside, in the cold, you are forced to build your own fire, You are forced to find people who don't require you to perform. You are forced to realize that the love you were begging for was always conditional, and the love you are capable of giving yourself is entirely free. Clara didn't just inherit a house. She inherited her own life. And the people who tried to make her feel small for leaving? They are still sitting in the house their mother built, waiting for someone else to come and rescue them. If you have ever had to walk away from a table where you were never really invited to eat, you know exactly how heavy that door is when you pull it shut. And if you want to hear another story about the moment someone finally stopped playing by rules that were rigged against them, click the video on your screen right now. People always show you who they are. Wettedy just slows it down. See you next time.